Welcome to Beyond the Binary, the show, where we would normally explore the diverse and complex experiences of individuals who are part or ally of the LGBTQ+ community. However, in honor of Truth and Reconciliation Day, we are going to focus on the lived experiences of Indigenous people and how their culture and identity influence each other. For that, I am thrilled to have Adrian O'Brien join us today for an enlightening conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Adrian, pronouns he, him. I am part of the Cree First Nations, and I always love participating in projects like these, but it seems like more often than not nowadays you can find me out protesting for local LGBTQ and First Nations rights.
Well, thanks for being here, Adrian. Without further ado, let's get on to the questions. So first question is, how does society appropriate Indigenous culture?
There are so many ways people appropriate First Nations culture and Indigenous culture in general. There are the more obvious stuff like craft store selling and dream catcher kits and stuff like that, but there's also more of the less obvious stuff. There's some things like using us as mascots, like the Shawinigan Cataract, which is the Quebec hockey team, which uses First Nations people as mascots, and they sell foam headdresses as merch. There's also the selling of our myths and legends as creepypastas and horror movies, not to mention the surprisingly large amount of Indian burial grounds in Hollywood horror movies. There's also stuff like online quizzes that supposedly tell you what your spirit animal is. There's a lot of pop culture is based in some form of cultural appropriation or mockery.
It's disheartening to see how First Nations culture and Indigenous culture are often appropriated and misrepresented. From craft stores selling Dreamcatcher kits to the use of First Nations people as mascots, there are many examples of cultural appropriation, and it's important to respect and honor traditions, myths, and legends of Indigenous cultures instead of commodifying or destroying them for profit or entertainment. Let's continue to raise awareness about these issues and promote cultural appreciation and understanding instead. Now, for our next question, how could government officials give proper reparations for what happened, in your opinion?
It's extremely hard to make up for generations of genocide and mistreatment, but the first steps are to help prevent future and current generations from feeling as affected by those things. For example, helping create better infrastructure in Indigenous communities, fund schools and addiction programs, creating medical and mental health services to stop the suicide epidemic faced in many Indigenous communities. And always listen to and honor survivors and Indigenous voices. Keep educating people on Canada's past. The more things get shoved under the rug, the more damage that gets done.
Absolutely. Taking steps to address the historical injustices and support Indigenous communities is crucial. By investing in infrastructure, education, addiction programs, and healthcare, we can make a positive impact. It's important to listen and honor Indigenous voices and educate others about Canada's history. Now, this is a question I'm really curious to know. What role does the everyday person play in reparations?
There's not much the average person can do in terms of monetary reparations beyond supporting Indigenous businesses and charities, and also the accepting of the fact that monetary reparations from the government is a necessary thing, such as stopping the stereotype that, oh yeah, all natives just get free money and stuff like that is very important. As for what the average person can do to help reconciliation is obviously one, wearing orange shirts on Orange Shirt Day that have been bought from Indigenous organizations. Another is to read the 94 calls to action from the National Truth and Reconciliation Committee and acting upon them. Also, just being an ally to causes such as Camp Morgan and MMIWG2S. Educating and awareness is the first steps to reconciliation.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Adrian. Supporting Indigenous businesses, challenging stereotypes, and advocating for reparations are all important steps. Is there anything you want to teach the audience?
I could talk to hours on a million different things if given the chance, but in light of recent events and the spirit of the normal theme of the show, I'd like to share a little bit about Two-Spirit history and culture. The modern term Two-Spirit is typically used to describe queer Indigenous people, but more recently, the title of Two-Spirit is being brought back to its pre-colonial traditional roots, and is often used to describe queer Indigenous folk that go beyond to teach and to fight for our rights. Two-Spirit people, such as myself, use our voices to educate others and to fight on many fronts for trans rights, for queer rights, and Indigenous rights. As such, since first contact, Two-Spirit people have been the victims of the worst parts of genocide, as even colonizers were smart enough to know that the educated are the hardest to defeat. As such, I'd like to remind every Indigenous person listening that your existence in itself is a protest, especially my other Two-Spirit people out there, and the educated natives are powerful. And so keep going, keep growing, keep learning.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I know I learned something new from that, so I'm sure a lot of our audience can take something away from that. It's very interesting. Now on to the next question. What are your favorite parts of your culture?
Coming in with the tough questions here. There's so many things that I could say. Indigenous culture is just so beautiful, and I love all of it. But above all else, I probably love the music. The drumming, the singing, all of it. There's just this, feeling in your chest when you listen to the drum beats, and knowing, those are the same drum beats the ancestors listened to for thousands of years. And it's just very beautiful. Song connects everyone and kind of brings everyone together, and it's just so powerful, and you just can't help but love it and be proud.
Now, one last question for you today, Adrian. Have you ever experienced racism and discrimination for being Indigenous?
Oh, absolutely. There's tons of examples, because that's something that just happens all the time, no matter where you go. There's the small but annoying things like racist jokes here and there, or when I get followed by security at the mall when I'm alone. And there's also the bigger, more impactful things, like the dozens of people at my school mocking me and other Indigenous students for smudging at school, or us getting yelled at by people when we tried to report them for their racist and hateful comments. It's not really something you can escape from anywhere, unfortunately.
I'm sorry that's happened to you at school, especially. It's not okay. Any discrimination is not okay, whether it be racism or discrimination against the LGBTQ plus or anything really. It's just really not okay, and it happens all too much. But yeah. On that note, I think it's time to wrap this interview up. I am so happy to have Adrian O'Brien, who joined me today for this conversation. It was definitely needed to happen, and I am very glad we got to have this discussion on this special day of Truth and Reconciliation Day. So, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.